Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Welcome to the Sarah Stevenson Tuesday Morning Forum. My name is Winston Robinson. I am your facilitator today, along with other co-facilitators, Ms. Laura McClellan, Ms. Carlenia Ivory Canty, Ms. Jackie Walton Edwards Walton, Ms. Nathalie McElrath, Ms. Mary Johnson, Steve Johnston, our website editor, and Ms. Sharitha Sherrill, our chaplain. Our forum begins at 8:30 a.m. and concludes at 9:45 p.m., at which time we will pause for announcements from the audience. Announcements can also be sent to sjohnston@tuesdayforumcharlotte.org. As always, we begin with a prayer. Ms. Aretha Sherrill will lead us.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm going to ask forgiveness to you and to you. I didn't know you when I walked in, and these are not my regular glasses. So I normally write a prayer, practice it, and practice it, and practice it. But I'm looking through my prayers this morning, and there doesn't seem to be one that's appropriate. So I'm just going to pray. Bow your heads and let's pray together. Dear Heavenly Father, we're so thankful for today. We're thankful for our leaders, our past leaders and aspiring leaders who are here today. We're thankful for having celebrated our past Martin Luther King Jr. birthday last month. We celebrate the births of the 9 fraternities and sororities last month. This month, we're embarking upon a Black History Month that's set aside to look at all of our inventors and our leaders and our Black leaders in the past. I'm so happy to be a part of this morning and thankful to God for being a participant. God, remember our children every place, all the time. They need you. Remember our nation. Remember our leader. Remember him as he does his speech tonight on the state of our union. Help us, guide us, and let us remember that prayer is not a duty or a habit, but a pouring forth of the heart and gratitude for every breath, every moment of life, and every experience. We're so happy to experience having you this morning. Let us say together, amen.
Amen. At this time, I'd like to do what I call a moment for silence, where we all take a chance to get our phones and put them on silent before we get into the presentation. All right, thank you. It won't be called out. Following the presentation, we'll take questions from the audience. Please raise your hand and your questions will be answered in the order in which your hand is acknowledged. Questions should be no longer than 30 seconds. Once a question is receives a response, there are no counters. We do not debate. We have a very special forum today in recognition of Black History Month, celebrating our local Black history here in the Charlotte area, Mecklenburg County. We have the alumni of Charlotte area Black high schools that are no longer in existence. We have a panel today, but I think we will have more of a conversational dialogue as opposed to a presentation. We will begin with introductions from the people you see up here today, our panel. We ask that you keep it to a minute because we also would like to hear from other alumnus of Black high schools. So we'll start with Ms. Nellie Ashford.
Good morning. As he has said, my name is Nellie Ashford. I attended Plato Price High School. I'm one of the persons who graduated from Plato Price in 1961, which was the last senior graduating class at Plato Price.
I'll take that off since I'm safely distanced from just about everybody except Donnie, and he's probably safe, I think. At least I'm all vaccinated, and have exercised reasonable precautions in the past, notwithstanding that I've had COVID twice and still have gotten over it. And I'm hoping that I don't have to deal with that ever again in my entire life. But the way things are out there now, you can't take too many precautions. And so I'm glad to see everybody is recognizing the importance of continuing to take those precautions, especially since we're still in the flu season. RSV, I think that's another one of those things we all got to be worried about. It's not one thing, it's another, as my grandfather used to say. I graduated from J.H. Gunn High School. Most of you know that there were a number of Rosenthal schools that were created back, I guess, between 1917 and 1932. And J.H. Gunn was the black school that was serving black folks in the eastern part of Mecklenburg County. And of course, you know, there were three others in the north, in the south, and the west, I think all of whom are probably represented here today. But J.H. Gunn had the distinction of carrying the name of a famous musician, Jimmy H. Gunn. A lot more to be said about that, and I'd be happy to entertain any comments that some of you may have about him or about the school. But maybe I'll get a chance to elaborate on some of that anyway. I started there in the first grade in 1954. I graduated in the last class before integration came to Mecklenburg County in 1966. And my journey, I think, was fairly well established by virtue of that experience. And I'm sure some of you had a similar experience to share as well. Donnie.
Morning. My name is Donnie Hoover. I attended Plato Price High School. Started in the first grade in 1955, so I'm a lot younger than him. And I attended until in 1961, they consolidated the school systems. That we used to have a county system and a city system. And in 1961, they consolidated those systems into the Charlotte Mecklenburg school system and started closing some of our schools or changing them. So they made Plato Price a junior high school in 61. And I continued through the 9th grade there, and then I had to go to York Road. I went to York Road 10th and 11th grade, and then finished from West Charlotte in 1967. I too await some questions or elaborate a little more as we go on.
Okay, I'm Doris. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. I am Doris Jones Boyd, and I graduated from Sterling High School, excuse me, in 1963. What I would like to do is take you with me back to before it was Sterling. We were bused, and I grew up in the Old Providence area, and we were bused to Pineville, to a school called Big Pineville. And of course, it was a Rosenwald school. I went there in first grade, and then when it was time for us to go to second grade, they bused us to Pineville Colored School. There was a white school, and it just said Pineville School. But our school was called Pineville Colored School. 1 year later, they changed the name to Sterling. And to this day, I don't know what Sterling meant. You know, maybe I'll do some research on that. I'll find somebody, or I don't know if anybody even still living that can tell us why the school was changed to Sterling. Maybe my oldest brothers can tell me, because they graduated back in the 50s. But in terms of my experiences at Sterling, you know, you don't know what you don't know. Everybody seems to be basically in the same station, if you will, in life. I do know that growing up and going to school there at Sterling, which was more or less the county part, we were programmed to become future farmers of America or future homemakers of America. There was nobody talked or said anything about college. It's just, if you didn't get it at home, very little of it was talked about among the families, and most of the time, not at all. But fortunately, my parents thought a lot about education because they knew clearly that it was a way to improve their station. And personally, I knew that I didn't want to be a homemaker. Wasn't quite sure what I was going to do, but I definitely did not want to do that. And my brothers were always talking about they didn't want to be farmers because a lot of the boys, I mean, that's what young men did. So I will entertain any questions you might have.
And we have an order in the form that we will acknowledge questions and direct them towards you as we receive them. We have one more person who came in.
Good morning, everybody. I'm sorry I'm late. Charlotte has changed since I last worked here in 1991, and the train was coming, but anyway, that's another story. I'm Betty B.J. Caldwell from the Pottstown community in Huntersville, the home of the historic Torrance Lytle High School. Torrance Lytle is a local, state, and national historic landmark that's in litigation today because a Black couple wanted to purchase it, but the Historic Landmarks Commission gave them so many different hoops to jump through that they were not able to purchase it. So right now it is in litigation, and right now the building is in bad shape. I think it's been almost 60 years since it closed in 1966 due to integration. And I think the powers that be, whomever that is, there's a stronghold over it, and the powers that be are waiting for it to literally fall in on itself. The parts of the building, the roofs are leaking, trees are growing out of it, and it's really unacceptable for a building to be in that condition because the building has been, well, people have wanted to purchase it, but when they see where it is, it's in a Black working class community that has been gentrified. Nobody really wants it now. But what they want the building and they want the people to move out. And once the people have moved out, then they can do their thing with it. But let me tell you a little bit about the history of Old Torrance Lytle. There were two people who were very instrumental in making sure that there was a high school in the northern end of Mecklenburg County. We had 4 little Rosenwald schools. There was one in the Long Creek section, if you know old-timey stuff. Long Creek is where Hopewell is. And then Cornelius is near the dam where there was another Rosenwald school, but it was Cornelius. And then there's one almost in the heart of Huntersville, and it's the one that has been recently declared a historic landmark at the state level and local level, not national, but at state and local. And then there was one in a place called Lytle Grove. If you're familiar with Highway 73 that runs to Cabarrus County, there was a section called Lytle Grove because this man was a mulatto. And if you know what that is, his mom was an enslaved person and her master had a child by her. And his name was Lytle. And so Mr. Lytle, because of his ethnicity, knew the value of getting an education for Black people. So he, in the early 1900s, he was able to send his children, the boys, excuse me, to Biddle Institute, which is now Johnson C. Smith, and the girls attended Barbara Scotia, which was over in Concord. And because Mr. Lytle was affluent enough to send his children to school at Biddle, he became acquainted with Professor Torrance. And you know how things work with people you network. So with him having more than one son at Biddle Institute, they struck up a friendship. And the two of them started to work together, to collaborate and work together and attend the county board meetings, Mecklenburg County board meetings, to see about getting a high school for the northern end of Mecklenburg County. Because if you wanted your child to go beyond the 6th grade, which was probably where the Rosenwald school stopped, you had to attend boarding schools in another state or city, like Salisbury, or come to Second Ward in Charlotte. And most people didn't have transportation, and it was just not something that they were able to do. So Mr. Lytle and Mr. Torrance, they worked together, lobbying the county commissioners. And finally, I think in about 1935, the county, excuse me, earmarked a certain amount of funds to build the school after Mr. Lytle had donated the land. And so we went there. The little Rosenwald schools were like satellites, elementary schools that fed into Torrance Lytle, well, Huntersville Colored School in 1937 when it was built. And I'll entertain any questions. I know that was kind of brief and a lot to absorb, but I'm glad to be here to share our story. And one other thing, we loved our school. We loved our teachers when we were not lovable. Our hair and our bodies were not always pristine and clean, but the teachers never let us know that we were not desirable. They hugged and loved on us like we were great people. And I am so appreciative of having to come through that because it made me a better person.
Thank you so much. Before we get into questions, I would like to just go through the audience. If you went to a black high school, please raise your hand, say your name, the school you attended, and your graduating class. All right, we'll start with Judge Bowers.
I'm Linwood Faust. I graduated from York Road High School. I started the school at McClintock Church School, which is a distillery on Urban Road. And in my second grade year, I went to Pineville School, where Doris Ford was. I left Pineville in the 10th grade, went to York Road, graduated from York Road in 1963.
I am Queen Norwood Thompson. I graduated from J.H. Gunn, and my grandfather, Lawrence Orr, was the president of the Brotherhood that pulled people of color together to petition the legislature, the Mecklenburg County School Board, for the establishment of Plato Price, Sterling, Torrance Lytle, and they used to call J.H. Gunn Clear Creek Public School, but it later changed to J.H. Gunn. So those were the 4 schools for Hamlin.
Thank you so much.
John Byron Bailey. I attended all the schools on Batesford Road. I attended Littleville Elementary School, which was just a block down the street from Johnson C. Smith. I went to Northwest Junior High, and then I went to West Charlotte Senior High when I graduated in 1961.
Good morning. My name is Annie Turner, and I graduated from the magnificent J.H. Gunn High School, where my brothers, 2 brothers attended that school, and my sister attended that school. I graduated in 1966 with Calvin, and I would like to say something later on about the teachers in the school.
I'm Maxine Hudson Weeds. I started out at Morgan Elementary School in Cherry, and we moved in 1955, and I went to Gunn. So I graduated from Gunn in 1963.
Hey everybody, my name is Jacqueline Stowe. I'm in Charlton. I attended Myers Street Elementary School. I just don't remember that Jacob's House thing. I did attend Myers Street Elementary School, and in the 7th grade, attended second ward senior. Well, it was junior senior high school, but I attended second ward in the 7th grade, and so we were, as a result of urban renewal, we were, you know the story, moved those down and did move and that sort of thing. So we moved to Andrew Terrace, and I started attending in the 8th grade, Irwin Avenue Junior High School. After Irwin Avenue Junior High School, 8th and 9th grade, I attended West Charlotte Senior High School. I graduated the class in 1967. I see a couple of my classmates, Scuba and or Strickland then. But at any rate, you know, it's just a long history of, I guess I can go years talking about this, but, good morning, everybody. Good morning. Oh, yeah. My story is a little bit different because I started out in the all-black schools and then I graduated from Independence High School, but I started out at Reed High School in Belmont, North Carolina, which was the all-black school from 1st to 12th grade. And then when we moved to Charlotte, I went to Lincoln Heights Elementary, all-black school. Then I went on to Northwest Junior High School, and then I went to West Charlotte. And then I got caught up in the mandatory busing, and that's when I ended up graduating from Independence High School.
Thank you so much, Ms. Mary. We have our first question from Ms. Natalie.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Several of you referred to a term that I'm not familiar with. I'm born and raised in New York, so I didn't know any of these school systems. But you're saying Rosenwell schools?
Rosenwald.
Rosenwald schools. What is a Rosenwald school?
It was named after Julius Rosenwald. He was the multimillionaire, also the president of CEO of Sears Roebuck Company. You may or may not be familiar with. Were they in New York? Did they have a Sears in New York?
Oh, yeah.
Well, then you know who that is. You know about him. And he was a philanthropist of sorts and put millions of dollars into establishing educational institutions for Black folks because he felt, I guess, some compulsion to do that. But they put a lot of money in all over the South.
We had, I think, 10 here in Mecklenburg County.
Actually, there were 5,000 of those Rosenwald schools established around 15 states.
Some of the Rosenwald School buildings still exist.
Yes, they tore ours down.
Village. Grittown. Sorry. But also, and Booker T. Washington, if I'm not mistaken, kind of initiated the program of the installation of Rosenwald schools, and he pretty much was the money behind it. But Booker T. Washington traveled all throughout the South and documented the disparities. They got it funded by Rosenwald.
I just wanted to comment. You don't hear that the land had to be donated by the community. And that's the part of our story that's left off. And Calvin W.T. Harris,
Road, yes.
yes,
Former governor.
Children's name, but their father gave that land for J.H. Gunn. And then the farmers had to clear the land and all of that. So there's an input from people who just had that determination. They knew education was the key.
Well, Queen, that was a lot of the story that got missed. There was always the story about the donor, but never very much told about the folks who actually did the work.
That pulled it together. And after the Civil War, you could not petition the county if you didn't own property. And so therefore, you had to be a property owner. That's why my grandfather was out trying to get people to buy land because of poll tax. You had to own property. And so therefore, he started out just trying to get Black farmers to buy land so they can petition the government and would have the right to vote. You didn't have the right to vote if you didn't own property.
Unfortunately, in Steel Creek, Black folk could not own, they didn't sell land as Black folk. So there were only 2 people in Steel Creek that were Black that owned property. So we didn't get the benefit of donating property, but white counterparts did donate the property to build a Flintlock school, which still exists in instruction.
Well, after the Civil War, one reason Mr. Julius Rosenwald was so interested in education, he was a Jew, and he had suffered some discrimination. So when he became president of Sears, he found out that Mr. Booker T. Washington needed some money. He was a philanthropist, and he was giving money to Black people who needed schools. And Booker T. Washington was down at Tuskegee. And Mr. Washington asked him, well, you know how you petition for a bond for money, for a grant. And so he was given a grant. And so after that, Booker T. and Mr. Rosenwald became kind of friends. And so because both of them believed in education, they wanted to put more schools for blacks because they knew that was the only way they could become upward mobile. And so that's why they collaborated and came up with the schools. And we have one in Huntersville that I think I mentioned is a local and state historic landmark. And it's quite interesting that most people don't understand the value of it. And when I try to articulate it to other people within our community, they say, well, it's just an old building. But that's the only way we were able to start to receive an education, because counties or states did not plan to educate the Negro.
Some schools were also one room, and sometimes that one room was a church before the school. During the week, it was the school, and during the Sundays, it was the church. There was one room school in my neighborhood, which was the right off of Beatty's-Ford and Sunset, and my mother's daughter went there, and across the street was the church. And they tried to move the school to preserve it, but because they didn't have the right equipment, the school fell apart. And I went to a 4-room school, which was supposed to be up a little more than the 1-room school. And my father was born 1894. My mother was born January 31st, 1893. And they were not my biological parents, but I'm one of the oldest legally adopted African Americans in Mecklenburg County, because it cost so much money to adopt a child. It took 5 years for me to become legally those people's child. My father did own a farm in Oakdale, and the only Black man in Oakdale that owned any property. I didn't know at the time that that was one of the criteria to do anything. And his being in World War I also gave him that okay. My classmates walked to school from Hoskins. My daddy drove me to school because the white school above us would not allow the sharecroppers' children to go to school. But they had told my parents that I could have gone there. But my daddy said, no, I'll drive you to school. So I was driven to school for 2.5 years because there was no bus in that neighborhood to come get one child. So we have had miles to have gone and miles to go. And I brought a picture of the school that I attended, which was Plato Price, and it started with the 4-room school. And it talks about the first 1-room school, which was in Faust's neighborhood, and the principal was Reverend Davison. And if you know the Davisons all around town, they were part of the African Americans who were enslaved by the Davisons at Davison College. And this would be Reverend Davison here. And the next school was a 4-room school at Plato Price. And the principal was Mr. G.E. McKeithen. And the last school was this brick building, which was Mr. Clark. And he was the last principal just before the closing that Donnie went to the other schools. So, and on the picture, it depicts some of the achievements that the people who I went to school with made from that 4-room school that had no gym. At first, I understand they had no cafeteria. We had no lab, but yet we had doctors, and of course we had attorneys, judges, and lawyers, and people who were musicians. We had dancers who went to California and became professional dancers, and of course educators. And so all of that is shown on here. This is the first graduating class, and this is the last graduating class, which would be my class. But I brought this to share with you as audience today, and those of you who wish to look at it may.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We got a question from Mr. Marion. Let me say this before we go on to Mr. Marion's question. I saw 3 people walking. I would like for them to stand and tell the schools your name. Give us your name. Let us know the school you went to.
Lena Helton Pickens, J.H. Gunn. Nancy Stroud, Dunbar High, Lynchburg, Virginia.
That was wrong.
I must be third because I attended school in Anson County. And I'm sure you guys have heard on the news what has happened in Anson County lately. Anyway, I grew up and attended Johnson C. Smith. My siblings were 12. My sister and I stole the 14th child. I'm number 10 in a group of siblings of 13. And as I grew up, I didn't know what was going on because my dad was a sharecropper. When I got out of Johnson C. Smith and well, I got kicked out of Barbara Scotia, that's another story. That's a story I'm not going to tell you. Anyway, graduating from Johnson C. Smith mid-year in 1965. Those of you who graduated after that are just babies. Just don't know. Anyway, I did not know the ramifications of sharecropping until I got to college and started really studying. And then I started sending my dad my whole check. I visited him one Sunday morning and gave him all the change and all the money I had in my pocketbook, and I forgot I had to pay toll. On my way back to Washington, I was living in Washington, D.C. at the time. I had to pay toll, but the lady at the first toll booth gave me enough money to get through because I told her what I had done. I wanted my dad to have everything that I knew he could have and that everything that he deserved. And he finally told me, just stop sending me money because he had married a new lady. He said she doesn't know what to do with it and she's gone now someplace. I said, Dad, where did she go? He said, I don't know and I don't care. My dad never talked like that about a woman in his life. Anyway, I graduated from Ansonville High School in Anson County. And it's been the boom of blues lately because of what one of the administrators did. One of the administrators' relationship with the student. You can Google it and find out what happened in Anson County. Anyway, I knew nothing except black education until I got my first master's degree. And it's different. It's very different. Thank you.
All right, we got 3 questions. One from Mr. Gary Marion, then from Crispin, and then from yes, ma'am. Yes. Tell me your name. All right, Mr. Marion, then Ms. Jack.
Yes, good morning. I wish there was more people here. I'm from up north, Massachusetts. 6 years ago when I moved to Charlotte, I was told the forum staff I was so appreciative of what they do on a weekly basis. I will. I just want to say thank you for being here. I wish I could sit and talk with you for longer. And I appreciate your story and your history, and I have so much respect for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Chris?
Good morning.
Good morning.
So, graduate of highest part. But
That ain't playing.
no, just going to that school and having a principal, Mr. Talmadge McDowell, and 2 other teachers who were graduating from West Charlotte, I could tell the way they nourish Black students differently in that environment. So can you tell me some of the negative aspects that you think integration powers with Black students and teachers?
And we got to keep this at 30 seconds apiece because I'm sure everybody wants to chime in. We don't have a lot of time.
Can I ask anytime want a cup of coffee? Yes, please.
You hit the nail on the head when you said the nourishment, because we didn't have much. Like Nellie said, we didn't have labs. You know, our library was in the back of the 6th grade classroom, and the librarian was one of the 6th grade teachers. But the teachers cared about us. They knew how to get the most out of you. So it didn't matter what level you were on, they pulled that level out of you and made sure that you reached your maximum potential. And I think that's something we lost in integration, except for the few teachers, black teachers we had that went with us at these different places. We lost that overall nourishment that we got from the teachers.
I worked with the kindergarten department with Charlotte Mecklenburg schools back in the day when kindergartens were first placed in the school system. And even back then, children 5 and 6 could tell when they were not really accepted by the teacher, and that's being someone white. It's just a difference. There was that separation that you could feel. And so it just followed the students all the way through. And that's why now big jails are built on third grade scores.
I'm gonna take a point of privilege to ask, did anybody make that? I know Miss Mary, what was it like making that transition from this nurturing environment of an all black school, then post integration, having to go to a white school? Did you feel the difference?
I'm sorry, y'all, I'm eating nuts. Yes, it was, I was in West Charlotte, and, we were a great school at that time. I mean, everybody was going to college, or they were getting a great job somewhere, or they had their own business. It was just wonderful. But when they had the mandatory busing, they did not prepare us, or they didn't prepare the white families for what was going to happen. They just made a decision that they were going to integrate.
Mm-hmm.
So it was, I would say, when I went to Independence, it was probably the worst experience I've ever had in my life. I mean, the teachers did not want us there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think because they ruined so many futures for children. And I think that's what we're suffering from now in the school system. That's why we have the problems that we have now. Because when you are a child and you go to a school and the teachers turn on you, turn against you, they don't want you there. I have never seen so much crying among students because they did not want us there. Their mothers did not want us there. They came to school, they was crying because they thought that we were just straight from Africa, from the jungle or something. I guess they didn't know, I'm very about No, I'm saying that's the perception they had. That was their perception. I know, but I'm just saying that they weren't prepared. They thought, I don't know what they thought, but they did not want us in their school. It was the only saving grace at Independence was Bill Malik. And she's on the county commission now. But she was my social studies or history teacher. And she really, really made us feel like we were, she kept telling y'all are somebody, don't let them treat you like this. Or don't let them mess with your mind. And I think that's what happened to a lot of Black children, that we left a nurturing environment in which we were doing so well.
Was it overt?
It was very overt. It was, they said it to you. Like I know one person said, went into class, and she was like an honorable student and all that. And she went into class and the teacher said, no N will make a in my class. So.
What was the parents' role in this? Did they go like this?
The parents of the students, they were crying too because they didn't want us there. They did not want us there at that school. And see, at the time, Independence, after you left Independence Boulevard, when you get on Alumni Road, it was nothing but woods all the way to Independence High School because it was in Mid Hills. And so you had a lot of, I don't want to say poor whites, but you know, people who.
Don't be afraid.
Yeah, they were not used to. So, you know, it might have been different in some of the schools that were local. but-
So we will get commentary from Judge Powell, Ms. Carroll, and Ms. Queen.
I'm glad that you asked that question because that tells us how far away you are from what was happening then. During that time, when we say segregation, it was in fact segregation. Black folk and white folk did nothing together. Black folk had no rights. I recall we lived, we were sharecroppers as well. And the white man would walk in our front door, wouldn't knock on the door. My dad landed in the floor sleep, he kept on top of the door and kissed off my mother. I mean, there's nothing you can do about that. I had to walk past a white school. We lived on a dirt road, the school was in the road. I walked past a white school to get on a bus to go to Pineville from, well, let's figure it like Lake Wild. So segregation is difficult to understand at this time because you have so many rights and privileges, or equal rights and privileges. Then you had nothing. You were just a nigger. That's right. Just plain and simple. You had to say yes, sir, to young white men and women. Mister, you have to call them Mister. I mean, it was so you need to watch some of the historic stuff to see how the world was. Unfortunately, we don't force our kids to watch those programs. Just like when you hear people talk about the singing shop calling this my nigga, this my, that's very offensive to people in my age group because that's all they call us, the nigga. We were happy when James Brown started saying, I'm black and I'm proud. Then we changed to black. We used to be colored and nigga. And then we started being black. James Brown, made it very proud. But anyway, so encourage your grandchildren and young folk around you to watch documentaries so you can get a better understanding of how life really was. That will help you understand now what's going on.
Ms. Sarita, then Ms. Queen.
And
No,
encourage,
then,
yeah, before I have to fit up here. Go ahead. I would like to address a school or a group of schools that have not been mentioned. And I cannot recall the name of the man who started these schools, but it was a white man. And it's the school that I know about is the school that my mother graduated from. And it was named Ben Salem School. And right beside Ben Salem School, a church was built.
On Road.
It's that on Sharon Amity at the corner of 74 and Sharon Amity. If you get off there, the school is no longer there because someone bought that property and now there are there's business offices there. But at that school, when they had done all the levels that were there, they had to go to Second Ward or West Charlotte because there were no high schools out there at that time. We're talking many years ago. I wasn't alive, but my mother loved that school and she talked about that school. She and her brothers. But I'd like to address J.H. Gunn. We were at J.H. Gunn, Kelvin and I, in that graduating class of 66. We experienced our first white teacher. And that was a true experience because I never felt like she wanted to be there. And I'm not so sure we felt like we wanted her to be there. Yeah, it goes both ways. But about our teachers were so nourishing and kind and gentle. And they did not just look at us as students. They looked at us as people. I grew up on a farm.
They would come to our house and have dinner. They would come to our house and get vegetables and fruit. If you did something at school that wasn't right, they'd take you home and have a little talk with your parents about what was going on, which I thought was, you know, it was all right, being that my aunt is the one that took me home that day. We had all kinds of organizations that we could be a part of. It wasn't just school. It was letting you know what goes on in the world. And I would like to say I'm grateful for going to J.H. Gunn High School.
Thank you so much, Ms. Teresa, Ms. Queen, and Ms. Mary.
I just wanted to add what it was like to be a Black person on the staff in a predominantly white school. I was transferred from, the School of Arts was then Northwest Junior High School. And they transferred me out to Alexander Graham School. It was the most miserable time in my life, and I love children, and I love teaching. Still a tutor, and I love every minute of it. But it was simply terrible because it was assumed that I knew nothing. That was the reason that I went back to school and got 3 more degrees and then a 4th. Because I felt stupid. And now I know I was stupid for doing it. That's all I'm gonna say.
All right, Ms. Queen. Ms. Queen, let me get Ms. Jackie right quick. Then we'll come around.
I grew up in the eastern part of the state, the Black Belt of North Carolina, right up near Wilson, going to Elizabeth City and all. In a rural area, but my parents had high school education, so they drove to Raleigh to school. We were some of the first Blacks to attend the white school from Middlesex, North Carolina. And the experience was there were not high expectations, but almost all of us knew we were not going to stay in Middlesex and we were going to continue to burn back. So things were somewhat different. Now, what was also different was that the high school that was later built, it was a school built by Craig Phillips, who is a former superintendent of public instruction. And the school was 50-50. Everything was 50-50. From cheerleaders, athletes, everything. So that was a unique kind of situation because we were forced to do things a different way. And it did work. But we know that that was not the case with most schools in North Carolina. And we did experience the prejudices and biases, but it was not quite as apparent as in some areas. And if you could come back around, I have a question regarding how far some folk will bus. Because one folk I was talking to, they were saying they lived out on Key Road and then would bus all the way to Gunn.
Okay, Ms. Queen.
I just want to comment on the preparation for integration. And Linwood and Donnie might remember this, but the National Association of Christians and Jews, they had a program called Anytown. And they brought the Black student leaders together and they put us through various scenarios to help us to work together. I think that's the preparation they did for integration. But beyond that, it didn't go anywhere else. And I don't think they call it NCCJ anymore. But that was, and it's a great experience for any child to go to. I made my own daughters go to Project Anytown because it really talks about intermingling together and where your value systems come from. So that's what I wanted just to comment that that was the only preparation I know of about integration.
I'm glad I did not have the privilege of entering an integrated school, but I graduated in the class of 64. In 66, our school closed and everybody had to go to North Neck. And that was a horrible time for the Black students. They were excellent students at Torrance Light, but when they got to North, they were really disrespected in the worst kind of way. It was like they were aliens. And I mean, they had physical confrontations, and guess what? It was never on the news. They hung dogs all the time. And sometimes now, well, they changed the demographics of North, but it was an awful time. But one thing that came out of it, when our Black young men started to go to North, do you know North has always excelled in sports? When you go in, you see all these Black beautiful boys who were magnificent ball players. And so that put them on the map for excellence in sports. Before that, they were puny, but now they are really above average.
I got a question before we go to Chris, you're next. What role did sharecropping play in the dynamics of school for those who experienced that? Was it hopeful, or was it kind of in the way of work, or what was the role of sharecropping?
Well, go ahead now.
Well, sharecropping, first of all, had nothing to do with school, but sharecropping was you working on the other man's farm, and you share the profit with them. Okay, so one of the effects of it probably would have been that you had to miss school during the time that crops were to be harvested and planted.
Right.
Black kids couldn't go to school because they had to stay home and work on the farm. Try to remember too now, Charlotte wasn't like Charlotte is today. Charlotte was rural.
Mm-hmm.
Just that, just to give you some parameters. Okay, South Prime Street down to Griffith Street, which is South Side. It was probably about a half mile beyond that. Is where the city limits sign was. You rule from that part out. Okay, Badersford Road. As soon as you cross over what is now I-85,
Rule.
that was the end of the city.
It was the city limit sign now.
So all of that Charlotte was very, very small in terms of the city of Charlotte. Charlotte was purely rural and farm.
And see, I want to answer your question. That is, understand the county, like Fausto said, if you live above West Charlotte, like on Caps Hill, Mine Road, whatever.
85.
Yeah, anything north of where 85 is now. If you lived on the left side of Badersford Road, you would bust to Plato Price. If you lived on the right side, you would Torrance Light. Torrance Light, and after, basically the rest of the county, all the way up to Iredell, way up to the next county. You come around to about North Tryon Street is kind of where Torrance Light will stop, and J.H. Gunn picked up. Anything from there on around to about Independence Boulevard, concluding Mid Hill and all of that, you went to J.H. Gunn. Now from there, Matthews on around the Pineville, you went to Sterling. And you had to be bused, it didn't matter. And then if you all are familiar with the outlet mall out on 160, that was the area we called Dixie back then. Dixie, from Dixie on around to Badersford Road, you came to Plato Price. Now they're talking about busing where I live. I was on, my grandfather was a sharecropper. I lived on Yorkmount Road. If you ever been down the Billy Graham Freeway, you went right through the farm where I grew up. You see those big office buildings now on the left and some on the right? That was our farm. I mean, it wasn't ours, but that was the farm I grew up on. Where I lived, there was some white kids that lived on our street, our road. A couple of white kids lived about a quarter mile down the street. They bought one bus to get us, another bus to get the white kids on our street to take them to South Mecklenburg, and then a quarter mile down the street, they brought another bus to get those white kids and take them to Berry Hill. So they didn't have any problem busing being bused to their school. Yeah. But the thing about sharecropping for me was that's what made me know I was going to study hard as I could, because I didn't want no more parts. I promised the Lord when he got me out that farm, he didn't have to ever worry about me digging up any more of his soil. And to this day, I've kept that promise.
So we got Ms. Nellie Ashford, then we have Ms. Jackie Walton, Ms. Mary, then Tyson. All right, Ms.
In this region, it was mainly textile, more than farm. There were farms, but my roommate at Central came from the eastern part of the state where there was tobacco. I learned what happened to colored folks when I went to 4-H camp. And the gentleman who was Mr. W.C. Cooper would have to do the 100 counties and determine what was happening on a farm for the sharecroppers certain times a year so that those campers could come. Places like Mecklenburg didn't have to worry about that because it was more textile and the people worked in the kitchens and did the floors and the mills. Now, down in Burgall, down Pender County, that area, Mr. Cooper would look at the map and determine that these children are doing something with tobacco. Each time of the year, these children had to do different things and he couldn't bring them to 4-H camp. And because if one head was counted on Monday morning from a family, that family may have to move because that child is missing and not getting on that truck to do whatever they were supposed to do for that white man's farm. So it was a learning experience for me because Faust was a camper and I was a counselor. Faust was born a few hours after me. So, and my classmates about to be 80. I just want to watch them be 80 in a few months. So what I'm saying is the kind of attitude that people had, we were honored. We were grateful for more things than people are now and respected what persons were doing things for us. That's all I wanted to say.
Okay, Ms. Jackie.
Hello again, everybody. I just can't sit here and not say anything. We're talking, yeah, talking about the integration piece of it, but it's likened to what happened when I went to segregated. It was segregated the whole time I was in school. I graduated in 1967, as I said. But what happened to us is likened to students being integrated and having to change their environment, go to other schools and that sort of thing. And I'm saying that to say, you lose what happened. Myers Street Elementary School, Second Ward, and they bulldozed down our community, tore up our schools. We had to move, so we lost our social connection. You know, and I know that people don't like to bring this up, but you know, depending on what social class you're in, we can have uppity niggas, we can have poor folks and all this. No, I'm just being real, y'all. Come on now. And you go from Brooklyn area, living in the alley on Andrew Lane, you know, you go to another school and you are treated like, you know, you from the wrong, as a good friend of mine say, you from the wrong side of the tracks, you know, and that sort of thing. I'm saying this to say this is a good dialogue that we're having, but I hope and pray that we continue to have these kinds of dialogues to teach our children. My great-grandkids right now, and they're at the age of 8, 9, 10, that sort of thing. When I drive downtown, they cannot believe that we live downtown in the Brooklyn area, downtown Charlotte. And so I have no Myers Street Elementary School to show them. And their second ward is just a gym now. But, you know, I'm glad we're having this conversation. And it wasn't all about the teachers sometimes. Like I say, sometimes you from the wrong side of the track, you got treated differently. Y'all black, y'all know what I'm talking about. Okay, let's keep it real. Okay.
So we got Chris, Ms. Jackie, Ms. Mary, and Tyson. Before we go to Chris, By show of hands, how many people are from a community that's no longer here? Like Brooklyn or the community where you grew up, or where you grew up is no longer intact. Okay, Chris.
Good morning, thank y'all. I love this. I hope we have parts one. But I was wondering, would y'all speak to high school kids, because I don't think they realize like this wasn't that long ago.
It's not.
They're thinking that this was 400 years ago, and a lot of high school kids nowadays they grandma 50, so like they don't realize how close this was, and just to visually see y'all and see how young and flourishing and how articulate and just sharp. Like, I don't think they realize it's closer than you think, and they don't get the grasp. Like, this was just last week, pretty much. So, would you be interested in talking to maybe like a West Charlotte, especially?
I would be glad to, because they don't really understand, and they think that I'm a racist when I try to explain to them about the difference between blacks and white and the other ethnicities. But it's important for them to know hip hop is 50 years old. We have been integrated 60, barely 60, and look where we are now. They don't understand that in just that shorter period of time where we can regress back to.
Ms. Walker.
Donnie answered part of it.
Okay.
And we found those no count.
All right, Ms. Nancy Stroud, you're gonna be at Ms. Mary, okay? All right.
I just wanted to say this about black teachers, because I heard somebody mention about black teachers. But back in those days, black teachers were teachers. They were not lateral entry. They went to college. They went to these teacher colleges in North Carolina. It was called Teachers College. And they went to those HBCUs, and they came out as teachers, as real teachers. And so they were very structured. They were strict. They dressed the part. You had no inkling that they were not a teacher. They didn't walk around with jeans on like you see teachers do now. And teachers that worked at the bank last week and this week they teach school. Right. Okay. So I just want to say that. And also, black teachers had advanced degrees. More black teachers had advanced degrees than white teachers. Black teachers could not get an advanced degree in the state of North Carolina. They could not. It was illegal. They could not go to Carolina and get a degree. They had to go out of state. And most of the black teachers either went to Columbia University, Boston University, New York University, and there were some others that they went to. And that's where they went, because they were not allowed to go to get a master's degree. So you had all these, and when they integrated to the white schools, those white parents wanted their kids in those black teachers' classes because they were really good. So they did want that. I served on the Arts and Science Council as a grant reviewer one time, and the second ward house on Babysport Road was asking for a grant to get some type of company that was going to preserve their written material to keep them from, dry rotting. So, and I was the only black on the grant review team, and we went to the second ward house, and the white people there were shocked at what they saw, and they couldn't believe that there was an honor society at Second Ward. They couldn't believe. I mean, they just couldn't believe all the clubs, the French club, the Spanish club. They couldn't believe that. They didn't know that we were that organized. They thought it was just a mess. And the last thing I'm going to say is that even after many years after all this happened, my daughter was in and this wasn't that long ago, my daughter was going to middle school, I think it was, and they had a career fair a school fair in Charlotte, and I went to it with her, and I went up to the table. There was one for the IB school. It was like an IB International Baccalaureate, and I walked up to the table with her, and as soon as I got there, the principal said, "Oh, I'm sorry, this is for high achieving students." That's the first. She didn't want to hear anything I had to say. And that's what she said. And now my daughter is an attorney and barred in 3 states.
you know, so it was just terrible the way they did us.
All right, we got, before we, this is the hardest thing I've ever had to do. I'm struggling with it. I'm fighting for my life. But we're gonna do Miss Nancy Stroud, then Tyson, because I know Tyson has something very impactful, then Miss Natalie. All right? So, Miss Stroud.
Okay, my story is a little bit different. I'm from Lynchburg, Virginia, and we had, we had contained neighborhoods too, where everybody, like my dad worked in at Babcock and Wilcox, but he was doing, like the low level maintenance and that kind of thing. And my mother was a homemaker, but where we went, we had Yoder School, that was elementary school. Our teachers there, they cared. Then I went to high school. High school was Paul Lawrence Dunbar High, and it was from the 8th grade to 8th and 9th. There was a building. They faced each other. One was the south side, one was the north side. When you went to 10th grade, you're going to the north side. That was like a big deal. They cared. We had teachers that cared. We ourselves, we pushed ourselves. I graduated in 1965. We pushed ourselves. It was a sort of like a competition because we wanted to be on the honor society. And our teachers, they knew that we were thespians. We went to science, math conferences, and all of that. They came to our high school, and they wanted, when integration started, they wanted to pick. They picked some students to go to EC Glass, to help integrate EC Glass. They came to Dunbar to get the cream of the crop and send those to EC Glass. And I was asked to be one of those students. I chose not to because Paul Lawrence Dunbar was the school that my family and everybody else, and we had a good thing going on. So I wasn't really that interested in going over there to integrate the school. But I did have the friends that did. Owen Caldwell, Linda Woodruff, and a few others. I want to give you a perspective that they gave us. When they integrated, it was just like when you see the pictures of Dot, same thing when Linda and Owen and all of them went into Paul Lawrence Dunbar, into EC Glass. They graduated, all of them became professionals. Linda Woodruff was one who we maintained our relationship through churches, through the social functions that our parents, they knew each other. We may have lived on different, but that they were still part of us, even though they were going to Glass. We found out years later, the problem, and we don't talk about this, but those who paid that price, they did pay a big price because they didn't feel like they belonged. Mm-hmm. They did not go back, for class reunions. Because, they graduated from the school, but they didn't go back there. They didn't. And they never felt like they belonged. What we did was they always came because they were part of our class, Dunbar High. But that was a real problem. Linda never felt like she belonged. Owen never felt like they belonged there. And we made them a part. They were part of our class of 65. And she was one who had a PhD in physical therapy and all. And she, at the University of Georgia, and she was at Chapel Hill too, but she made it her life's mission to get as many PhDs in physical therapy. And a couple of them live right here in Charlotte, right now. But I'm just saying, that was a price that they paid that we don't even talk about. But they did, they suffered through it.
Thank you, Ms. Stroud. We got Tyson, Ms. Nathalie, Miko, And Ms. Thelma Bailey.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tyson Bates. Mrs. Betty Caldwell mentioned my wife and myself. We're the couple that are currently in litigation towards Lyra. For the last 8 years, we've been going back and forth for the Landmarks Commission and purchasing schools. I concur. I'll bring your name down, but this is great. Thank you. You see this. The conversation is awesome. I want to make a statement and I have a question. So, my wife and I were both HBCU graduates, Justin C. State University. I attended East Tennessee State to get my master's degree, and two different worlds. Right now we own the Child Enrichment Center, in which we've had a lot of success in cultivating relationships with young people for the last 18 years. And what we've been able to see is just being relational, and it's coming from a place of love. We've been able to get children that had issues in any space that they've been in to just conform to that environment and go on and do positive things. And so this conversation is new I'm a graduate of 1998 high school, so we've been taught that integration was such a great thing. The conversation that we're having now about integration and the negative aspect, we've never heard of it. It's not something that's on the forefront. So my question to everyone that attended, I don't know this gentleman's name as well, but he mentioned documentaries. But where can because we still educators, I still work with young people on a daily basis. Where do I get, what sources are there books, are there specific documentaries so that we can make young people abreast to what the transition was from going from being in an all-black school, going into a school where you weren't wanted by the teachers, you weren't wanted by the students. And again, we've always been taught, everything that we've been taught in history books, integration was just, it was great. But like you said, these people that were integrated, they don't attend their class reunions because they didn't feel the love. So I want to be able to continue this conversation with young people and just people under the spirit of my influence. I was like, no, how can I?
Think that. Yeah, honestly, I went to Myers Park. I don't understand mine either. I graduated in 99. But so let me ask, before we go to Ms. Natalie, then Miko, first of all, great news. If you don't have anything to do, we've just been allowed to extend this to 10:30. So, if you gotta go, you gotta go. But I wanted to ask Ms. Nancy Stroud, that system of nurturing you talk about that allowed those students who integrated the white high school to be successful. It made me think about the system around them and how they were in social schools and church. Let me ask you this. It's a tough question. Now think about Judge Faust's upbringing. Do you think somebody in a more vulnerable lifestyle could have matriculated in the way they did without that, I guess, that feeling of, because it feels like the people who they chose came from a background of more, even working class affluent black people.
We were poor and just didn't know it. And so that's not what I'm saying. We put, you had school shoes, church shoes, and that kind of thing. But we came from a family. And there were more affluent black people than we were. But what they were coming for were the ones who were academically, successful. But I tend to think that, I don't know, it just seemed that those of us we didn't know the difference. I mean, we really didn't know the difference because we were nurtured, they were nurtured. We took them in, we still had we went to games together at Dunbar High, even though they were EC Glass. We had our little parties in the basement at Linda Woodruff's house. Those kind of things. So we maintained that connection all the way through. So they were nurtured just as we were. But we had good teachers. They would pay, I don't care if you did sports or whatever, they would pay for you to go to conferences. If your folk couldn't afford to do that, they did a lot of that. So it wasn't much difference in terms of a class of blacks. that were asked to go, they were just coming from the fund to educate.
Okay. Ms. Lane, I'm sorry, it was so cool back then. Please chime in.
I was going to comment on two things. I remember when,
You can talk up, we can't hear you.
when Maine Elementary was integrated. Mrs. Eddie Long came there as the first white teacher. And it was so interesting when she talked.
Not that it is. Oh, okay.
When she talked, the main thing that she said was, you know, when those children came and some of them came early, she said, I started working with them because I already had my plans for the day. So she was working with them, and I'm to find out she was called to the office, Mr. Lowell, never shall forget it. And he said to her, you don't need to work with those children before the school starts. School starts at what, 8 o'clock or something. He said, but Mr. Lowell, I'm already prepared and ready for school. These children need it. So I'm just giving them that. Don't give them any extra attention. That was the big thing that she always said, and it really hurt her. So she had to stop nurturing and helping.
Thank you so much for sharing that. All right. Miss Natalie, April, Miss Delma Byers Bailey, Miss Queen, then Chris.
And,
Then Miss Nelly.
And again, let me preface it by saying I was raised in the North. Every school we went to was segregated all of my life. But the only thing I know about segregation is really what was reported on the news. So mine is more functionally. Number one, were the black schools, the all black schools, regulated by CMS? Were the CMS teachers, all the teachers of black school, employees of CMS? And did they just say one day schools are going to be segregated and then all black schools were closed?
Yeah.
And then did all the teachers in the black schools get positions when they were integrated into the white schools?
Some.
So sort of functionally, how did
The
all that
schools
roll
were
out?
closed in 1963. My class, Linwood was in that class too. Sorry, but I've got to put that out there because that's the question you raised at this time.
Did they close all of them?
They closed the county schools, the schools that we're talking about. They closed those schools, and Martin Luther King was our high school commencement speaker that year. Because my sisters who came after me, they stayed there at Sterling until 1964 or 65. But 1963 is when all of the high schools were in the process of being actually shut down.
J.H. Gunn didn't actually get shut down until 66.
66, but they had the board was working on.
They were working on that.
Yeah.
Because they moved the Board of Education out there after they closed.
Actually, they started about 1960, 61. They started looking at closing schools down.
Do you feel the difference in disparity between county and city schools?
Yes.
Oh, a big difference. Major difference.
Between county and city and black and white.
In the county, we had one band for the county, and then each school had their own band. The music teacher would go to Sterling, leave Sterling, and then go to J.H. Gunn, or Plato Price. I'm sorry, Plato Price. I have friends at J.H. Gunn too. And there was a couple of the coaches. The coaches would coach more than one school, so we had our own individual activities, but then we had countywide, because I was in the countywide band. We had a countywide chorus, they call it the Glee Club. And we all knew each other, really, because the churches were closer, did more connectional things together, and the schools did more connectional things together. So it was a big difference.
Is it true y'all would get the hand
Yes.
from white schools?
Yes, I never
heard that's why West Charlotte's colors are maroon and gold, because they would get the leftovers from Harvard.
I never got a brand new book until I was in the 10th grade. And my brothers drove the county buses. They never sent new buses out to the county. My brothers drove old buses from the white schools.
Did all the teachers have jobs when they segregated? The black teachers, were they all had to be retested?
go to integrated schools.
Okay. April.
But the same thing happened across the state. It wasn't just in Mecklenburg County. All of the black schools were closed. And they left one white school, one black high school in each one of these cities, like Greensboro, Charlotte, High Point. Everyone kept one black school, and all the rest of the schools, everybody said it was white.
Was this a negotiation?
No. Mandate.
Like, how did they come here?
It's called America. We don't understand. We don't know.
What was that? So there was no process to say this school.
No.
Why would Charlotte do that?
They left what was the new school?
Okay. All right, April.
Segregation versus Plessy.
Plessy versus Ferguson.
Yeah.
And before that, Mr. Delane. But anyway, I'm sorry, April.
That's all right. I didn't go to school here in Mecklenburg County at all. I have the pleasure of being raised up in Paisley, South Carolina. Mecklenburg County, if anybody goes through there going to Myrtle Beach outside of Monroe. But it was a little different, and speaking of the different counties and districts and everything like that, it was one school per everybody. We're Chesterfield County school system. Family roots here in Charlotte, but my grandparents just didn't want to raise their grandkids up here in the city, so we had to look down south. But, I'm a 70s baby, so I didn't know the difference, didn't see the difference, as far as the segregation, because I think you had just got from the school that I went to. Now, my mom went to, it was called Petersburg Elementary, and that's where all the black folks went and the white folks went to, which is Central High now. But, when we asked, what was the difference? Because we was merging out of that. And so we didn't see the difference. But the only thing that I noticed when I was a kid, is the country. So you have one high school, one elementary school, and one middle school. And students feel like it's okay to disrespect and fight their teachers. Now, I knew if I went to school and fight my teacher, I would get a beat down of a lifetime. But your teacher, when I was in elementary, middle school, heading up to high school, your teacher were your Sunday school teacher, or that was the pastor's wife. So we knew how to respect our teachers. And they knew, because they lived maybe a few blocks down the road from you. So if you got out of line, they don't beat you already home that your mama know that you had did something at school. Somehow, I know that's probably a little different because, my kids are already adults, they're grown, they're doing their own thing as parents now. But the thing, how the schools have changed dramatically, like someone stated, teachers dress appropriately. They dress as professionals because that's how they consider themselves. They knew how to dress. They looked as if like they were going to church. So you knew how to respect your teachers. So the question is, how and should we go back into that? Because I think because now your teachers look like they're your age, or they just went to school with your siblings, and it's okay for this student, this child. I just saw something other than I did mediation with something dealing with kids at school with the teacher or whatever. But I saw a whole different dynamic where it went from you respect anything that had anything to do with school to now. I think that there's a change, and it needs to be changed back to
Head east of Longwood Avenue.
We had already grew up in.
Thank you, April. But before we go to Ms. Byers Bailey, can you please kind of preface your question with your relationship to black schools and tell us a bit about your father? Yes.
Okay.
For the record, I'm sure everybody here knows.
My parents were educators,
And you were talking about how the educators, they graduated, well, my dad graduated from Charlotte, my mother graduated from Virginia State Teachers College. And they met at Highland High School in Gastonia. And they got married. Can't hear you. Oh, I'm sorry. I said they met at Highland High School in Gastonia. That's where they were teaching kids black school then, black school. Anyways, we moved to Charlotte in 43, 44, for long there. My dad was teaching because he got a principalship at Fairview Elementary School in Greenville. And most of the kids from Fairview homes went to his school. He taught there for 25 years. And through that time, he covered 3 generations of kids. So he taught the grandma, he taught the mama, and so he taught the kids. And back then, they could have the Board of Education. If you cut up, he would introduce you to that board to make sure you made the point that you were supposed to do that. Yeah. But he had a relationship with the community, and he went for his thing. He considered his boys. If his boys got in trouble, he would go to the juvenile hall and stand. He and one of his men teachers, and he always preferred to have men teachers because he wanted the boys to know what it was like to be a man. He was a tall man, especially to those short elementary school kids, and they just looked up to him. And he always insisted, talking about how you had to dress to make sure they understood this was important. He hated shirt tails out. I mean, it just would drive him up a wall to see anybody walk around with their shirt tails out. And so he always made the boys put their shirt tails. When they got, as the kids came through, he wouldn't let me go to school at his school because he said I would be disruptive. So I went to Middleville Elementary School, which was right up the street. I lived on Maidstone Road, and Middleville was right over the Kelvin, right there. But when we all went to Northwest, we connected kids from Fairview, from through the hills, and Middleville, and we all mingled together. But in 5th grade, we were exposed to band and orchestra, and one teacher went from school to school, so that when we all got to Northwest, all these students that had started band and orchestra in the 5th grade congregated together. We put on some fabulous musical productions. The orchestra would be in the orchestra in Northwest, that auditorium that they rebuilt. That was where we would put on our productions. We'd have the orchestra down in front, and then we would have musicals, and we would practice to make sure, and we do 2 or 3 productions so that to make sure that all the parents from all these various schools could come. But our teachers were really, I mean, when I was growing up, it was nothing to have to go spend the summer in New York because my parents were going to Columbia to get their upper educational credentials improved, because that was the only way they could improve their pay. You got more money if you had an advanced degree, and we're hardly making enough anyway. So they would go back and get their masters and more credits after their masters. But that was just what they did. And they spent summers with my aunt in New York, or summers with my grandparents in Wilson and Rocky Mountains, because my parents had to go and get these advanced degrees every summer for years. But when we were at Northwest, we always had teachers that were truly focused on making sure we knew what we needed to know. We had, in 9th grade, I had teach Miss Amos. That was, she, English teacher. Oh, yes. It was every day you had to write 100 sentences. If it was on, the thing was on the thing for that week, that day was on nouns.
you had to write 100 sentences using a noun in the sentence. Oh, God. You know, I never did get to 100. I could get to 98, I could get to 99, but by the 100th time, I could not think of another sentence to make a noun, use a noun. But she would walk around with this notebook and she would look at your papers every morning. And if you didn't, and she would look, check, make sure you had 100. And if you didn't get 100, she would give you an F. And she walked to every student every day to make sure they did all of those sentences. But if you did it, and she also required you to read a book a week. You had to write a book report, turn your book report in on Friday, and you had to illustrate the cover. I did not like to read, but and she didn't care what book, she did not care, truly did not care what book you read, but we had to read the book. So I decided, if I've got to read about something, I'm going to read about something I like. So I found Walter Farley, I think his name is, wrote about the black. Well, he wrote a book. He wrote so many books about horses. It was about the black's cousins, the black uncle, the black father. I wrote, but in that process, I learned to enjoy it. I just read it because you had to read, but I didn't. The stuff that she taught me in the 9th grade about English and English composition and English structure and how to diagram sentences. I had to teach my daughter how to diagram a sentence. And then she went to school and taught her teacher how to diagram a sentence. Because that was what she did. I was using the English stuff that she taught me in the 9th grade when I was in law school. That's how completely, bibliography, the citations, footnotes, all of that, I learned in the 9th grade. Got to West Charlotte. That's the quality of teachers we had. Right. When I got to West Charlotte, I was introduced to Mr. Piles. Oh, yeah. Julian Piles.
Man.
He was so particular about, I had him 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade. By the time I got to 12th grade, he was teaching the physics, he was teaching calculus, he was teaching trigonometry, geometry, everything. But in addition to all of that, on Friday, he said, come back to my class on Friday evening, because I've got something else I want to teach. That we did not have AP. But he had decided he wanted to teach us how to take the AP exam. So Friday nights, we had to come back to him. On Saturday morning, we had to meet him in the physics lab. And on Sunday afternoon, we had to come to his house and learn more in his kitchen. And he did that for a year, my senior year. And that was the part when we had, when the integration came, I forgot to tell you. The reason you all had county schools and we had city schools is because if one member of the family taught in the city schools, then the other person in the family could not teach in the city schools, so they had to teach in the county school. So my mother taught in Gaston County, the Reed-High. Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of people who lived in Charlotte were teaching at Reed-High. Because if you taught in the city, the spouse couldn't teach in the city, you had to teach in the county. And then a lot of people that lived in my community taught in the county because their husbands worked in the city.
Thank you so much. But now we got Queen, Chris, Miss Nellie, and Miss Jack.
I'm going to stop some of the discussion. I'm a trained federal compliance monitor. My husband was career military, and I was a trained federal compliance monitor in the state of Delaware. It is public law. Any school that gets federal funds, it's against the law for children to sit and fail. And the way I got in trouble is I did a study on school failing. And I thought it was going to be for Butler, but it came for all of the schools. Well, that study shows that a child can fail year after year and never get any counseling, never get any interventions, a teacher can have a 99% failure rate year after year. It's against federal law. It's education malpractice. That sums up everything. Because we're not holding schools accountable, what happens to a child who's got problems? They don't get a counselor year after year. And that's what I've been so passionate about. It's against federal funds. And you talk about those caring teachers who reached out and helped with it. They can't, even if it's a private school and they got a road that goes past it, they get federal funds. So it's against the law for children to sit and fail. And I've been appalled that a teacher that could have that. What they've done with us is they've done brainwashing and black self-hate, the lady back then. And there's a disparity that we need some re-education of our minds. Student services, what happens when a child fails? I can tell you, nothing. And that's against the law. And we should not be receiving federal funds unless we can show the interventions that we used. You know, what did you do to help these students? Group activities like the plays and the operettas, those are teaching social skills that they need. So that's what my biggest passion has been. We're erasing our education history and trying to make it look like the Rosenwald schools is like this one that's going up. That Shalom School, where they only had 3 schools. A school was a community where we did all kinds of things and gravitated to that community. That was not that Rosenwald School where only 3 students went and they can't even show federal funds or any kind of funding of that school. I've been talking to people at Torrance Live about this, but that's what is happening. Not only do they not want us to teach our history, they're erasing their history. They bring people from the outside who do not know Pharaoh, and they want them to tell our story. It's not working.
Chris, Ms. Nellie, Ms. Jackie, and Jelon, and Judge Faust.
Oh yeah. This is kind of a follow-up of Miss Natalie's question. Like in America, everything going down to money. So including education, and it's like the principals have a chokehold on them because they have to do all these things for federal, just for funding. And even with the school board, how much did that play an issue with an all-black school? Being an all-black school, did they kind of just let you guys do your own thing? Yeah. Or did they come and regulate really hard?
Can I add to that? And that's why I'm so surprised, because all of this is happening under the idea of the guise of separate but equal. And we talk about this disparity. What's the system holding the but equal part accountable?
No.
You have to go back. You have to go back and look at what was happening there. But I think it goes back to the teachers. I mean, let me talk to you about Plato Price for a minute. When we went to York Road, they thought that we were little country bumpkins and we weren't going to be prepared to do anything. And that first class, my brother was in it, and another one of his classmates named Clifton Woods. And they went over to York Road, and they ended up graduating number 1 and number 2 in the York Road class. Well, my brother went on to one of the first black kids to go to UNC, Chapel Hill, in '62. And the other guy, Clifton, went on to Central, North Carolina Central. Anyway, long story short, my brother then became the second black student to be admitted to Duke's Medical School and became a cardiac surgeon. The Clifton Woods, the other guy, became a PhD chemist and ultimately ended up teaching chemistry at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. Dale Watt went to Plato Price. and you all know his history, becoming a congressman. This gentleman sitting beside me, he's all modest, and he graduated from J.H. Gunn. I don't even think y'all had a gym, did you?
No.
Didn't have a
We
gym, but
did in 55.
Hmm.
They built the first gym in 55, 56.
But he went on to play for Davidson College under Lefty Giselle. You know, being from J.H. Gunn didn't slow him down. You know, we were able to prosper at these schools because of the nurture. I don't know nothing about regulations or whether. I'm sure if there were some regulations, they held us to a higher standard than they did the white students. But it was our teachers that pushed us, and
You think being motivated to get out that phone, play the party?
well, yeah. I mean, we had to get up every morning and milk cows, feed the hogs, feed the chickens, put the cows in the pasture, and then go get ready to catch a bus by 7 o'clock. Go to school.
What time do you wake up? Like
About 5 o'clock.
Put me at the tail end. Can I piggyback on what Donnie said? I think what we have to remember is a couple of things. Our plight in life is actually biblical. First shall be last, and last shall be first. By the year 2050, most of Mecklenburg County, all of North Carolina, probably the United States, is going to be majority brown, black and brown. So, and all these things are evolving. I have a slightly different perspective. Ann knows about this. I'm one of those folks who didn't go to an HBCU. And Ms. Jones, the drama teacher, is the one who's responsible for that, by the way, Ann. First white teacher we ever had. So my experience with her was radically different. But my whole life has been about realization that I am not the least. I really am the best. I think if you reflect that in what you do on a daily basis, where you go, where you end up in your life really is up to you, no matter what you have to do to get there. My guidance counselor, Ray Warren, and you will remember this, he took us all out of class after we took the PSAT and said, none of you is as stupid. None of you are stupid as you appear to be on the PSAT. Took us into his office, administered a battery of standardized tests, and I think most of us improved our scores by some astounding amount. From the PSAT to the SAT, I improved by 400 points. That was unheard of. But it was all a matter of what you were exposed to. But once I got to Davidson, where I was supposed to go to A&T, I was supposed to go to Johnson C. Smith, both places that offered all of us full scholarships. And when I told Ray Rory, he showed up at my house to take me to Johnson C. Smith or to A&T, whichever one I'd selected. I announced to him at that point that I wasn't going. And he told me I was crazy that I wasn't going there. When I got to undergraduate school, and this is just a brief story, when I got to undergraduate school, every boy there was an all-male school at the time, all whites. I was the first black male from Charlotte Mecklenburg school system to go there. And when I got there, I realized that I was not what they were. I never tried to be what they were. I never fit in like they did. And I don't go back like they do. I don't go to reunions. We now have a black student reunion coming up this weekend, I believe. I'm not going to that either. I don't feel a part of any of it. And I'm sort of out there by myself, actually, right? Because you can't go back. You either move forward or you die. And so what has happened to us as Americans? I feel like we're talking, this is the choir, and we're all singing the same song. Message needs to be directed elsewhere. There's action that needs to occur on other fronts, right? I really enjoy this. I think it's great. I feel good about all the experiences that we've had. Ross and I've had this conversation, and I've had this conversation. You had it with other people. But then what happens now? What do we do about it?
I like this thing right here. We, as Tuesday Morning Forum, you all know, we've been around for over 40 years, thanks to Sarah Stevenson. And what we have been doing over the years is sharing information. And of course, Steve came on board years ago where he's actually archiving all of these conversations that we are having. And we encourage you
to ask people to look at what we have shared here this morning. This has been phenomenal for us and the crowd, and what you all are sharing is history. And what we do with it, is Facebook Live, it's live streaming, and anybody can go back and look at what is going on here. What we do is share information. That's why a lot of us are here. Those of us that come consistently, we learn so much. And that's the only way we can tell you, we can share with you to encourage people to, I tell people, go and look at what they said, what they shared at Tuesday Morning Forward. And because we're on Facebook, anyone can look at what you all are sharing this morning. And I'm encouraging you to come back. You know, we are able bodies, all of us that are in here right now. Come back, because we do have some excellent speakers. There are a lot of good things that are happening, and we don't want to focus on the negative things that happen. But these stories, I mean, this is information that Steve has been journaling for us for so long about us and our Black community. This is powerful. This is something that you can use. You can share with your families about what you have here this morning. So this is what we do. We just bring the people to the people in our community through Tuesday Morning Forward. So we are asking you all that think about what has been shared here this morning. Don't discount any of it. Please come back, send people to our website, and let them know this is very, very important that our kids do understand about this. Now, what you all decide to do, this is the first time we've taken a list because I'm interested, and we will talk about this as a group. Several of us that are facilitators. We will talk about what we can do with this to get this information out. Our school board members, other than Thelma, need to be here this morning as well. But we don't know who's going to show up when we send out, I think it's 1,200 emails that we invite people to come to the Tuesday Forward. So we would ask you to advertise what you have heard and shared this morning and to come back. And we've got to figure out a way where we can get these stories shared with our students, particularly at our predominantly Black schools. And I mean, what I'm sitting here thinking is this video needs to go out. The school board needs to listen to it. The schools need to have it in one of their classes where our kids, our predominantly Black kids, can learn about what it used to be, because someone mentioned they just don't know. They don't have an idea. And this is not just for Charlotte, as we've listened to Nancy and others that are from other cities or states. It's basically been across the board. So it needs to be shared. So just to answer and just to reiterate what you said, Kevin, yes, this information needs to be shared.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
You on the list, Judge Krause.
I'm sorry.
You can consolidate both of them. But we're gonna time is quickly approaching.
Listen, I'm Caldwell. You hadn't called me.
Okay, I got you. This is what we're gonna do. Everybody, please take a minute, and we're gonna go down the list. We got Miss Nellie Ashford, Miss Jackie it was Walton, Jelon, Judge Faust, Mr. Basista, and Miss
B.J. Caldwell.
Miss Caldwell. One more time, all right? And Miss Caldwell, you'll close it out. All right, Miss.
All I wanted to say is my story is totally different from most of you in the room. I came from folk who weren't educated. I came from the country. And my parents had friends who were slaves. I didn't know it at the time. I came from a church that had no educated folk in it. When church was over, people would ease over to people who could read and write. And they would share a letter of some type from their breast pocket or pocketbook with the person who could read and write. Sometimes the preacher couldn't even read and write. I had inside of me, because I had no role models, that I really wanted to be like you all who were living in the city. I didn't want to milk cows no more in the morning. I didn't want to have to run to the bus with a typewriter, my instrument, and 4 heavy books. I didn't want to do that, but I didn't know how. I didn't have anybody to help me to want to do any of those things but my mom and dad. Mama would say, go to school, honey. She had a 3rd grade education. My father would say, he had a 1st grade education. But his was by rote. He would do his numbers, $3.25, $1.72 while you're writing it down. He would look up in the sky and get every number that was the answer while you're writing with your pencil. So I had to come from a group of folk who wanted you to, and I didn't know how, because I didn't have teachers in my corner because I was an outsider. You know, an adopted child was not looked at the same way the siblings in a family is. I was a whisper child.
Time is up. I'm the
Okay.
I'm the timer.
Okay, and I'm
but yeah.
My thing is, I had something inside of me that made me want to, because I looked at the teachers who came to the county to teach, and I wanted whatever it was that they had come from. That's all.
Ms. Jackie Edwards.
Yes, just for information, and Delma, you can vouch for this, every school board member was invited today. Right? I invited everyone. My question is, can you just tell me briefly the communities and the churches that were in some of the areas so that we can kind of have a perspective?
If everybody would just give a name answer instead of going into it, that'd be appreciated.
School and a community.
The school and the community. Church and community.
Logan Chapel Semi Church, very near J.H. Gunn, although I live in Huntersville.
Okay.
Blowing Blade. Blowing Blade. Near J.H. Gunn.
Judge Fowler, what was Sterling? Lake Dixon, not Lake, whatever Lake was.
Steel Creek was McClintock Presbyterian Church.
China Grove.
China Grove.
China Grove was Plato Price?
No, Sterling.
What was the Plato? That's
Plato
Wilson
Price,
area, right?
right next to More Sanctuary and Zion Church, where it sits today.
Okay.
And then we had Steel Creek and Mount Olive, people from Mount Olive and Dixon.
Woodland Presbyterian, Plato Price, from my neighborhood, and Salem Baptist Church.
We had several, but I will say the United House of Prayer and Chapel Hill Missionary Baptist Church, and it was Pottstown Community.
Thank you so much. Jalen?
Matthews Merkland. At that time, it was Merkland, and then Matthews Chapel, and the two merged. So those were the schools, 2 churches.
Great Providence Baptist Church and Greater Bethel AME
Pride Turner
Church, and that's in the
She was in Pride.
Plaza and East West area. What was it back then? I'm sorry. Partner, where was it then? Where was it then?
Originally, where was it?
We'll get it afterwards. We gotta move on. We gotta move on.
You guys mentioned difficulty of adjusting to integration, and it didn't like to walk around certain white people, not certain, but white people in general during that time. And so, time has changed now. It's more mixing and mingle with white people. Have you guys adjusted to that, or is it kind of still the same? Behavior towards them?
We've adjusted to everything. It's required to survive.
We've adjusted. As everybody has to adjust to change. I keep hearing people say integration caused the problem that we have now with our students. I don't believe that is true. Students did change after integration, but it wasn't necessarily because of integration. before integration, when black kids were in black schools, there was very heavy discipline. So we didn't have discipline problems in school. Parents took care of it at home. The same thing happened as we got to integrated schools, except that discipline was disproportionate with African Americans than it was in white folks. So that's why that came out. Once the discipline came out, then we began to lose what we began to change as a people. So we stopped requiring certain things of our children. And so that kept evolving. You have now the parents that you have. They accuse more than correct. When the teacher contacts the home, the parent comes in defending the child, regardless of what it is. Most parents do that. So that's a problem.
All right, Judge Faust, quickly, Mr. Basisa, then Ms. Caldwell will close it out.
Just a quick comment. I believe poverty, fear, injustice, these are the things that they will never go away. They'll always be here. But what puzzles me is I found the very same negative things. Back then, it wonders, propped a lot of people up. And today is doing the opposite. I believe we need to search into that soul, find out why did you do positive thing? You can preserve it, package it, and preserve it for posterity, for the children that often come. Because those are the things that remember poverty is always your mom. So if you can package it and preserve it for the upcoming generation, I think it would be something good.
Thank you. Ms. Caldwell?
Oh, this is a little different. I wanted you to know that Huntersville, the town of Huntersville, is celebrating its 150th anniversary. And nobody black was on that committee that, you pull all these people together. So a white friend of mine called me and said, BJ, we have all these white men that we're going to put on Facebook starting in February, and we need some black people. And she said, well, I want to do you. And I said, well, I know somebody else, because we have a black teacher, Miss White, over at the Oaks, and she's still in Huntersville. So what I'm doing is maybe what some of you may wish to do. I am calling all the families of the descendants of the families who lived in Pottstown back as far as we can go, and I'm compiling that so they will know, the powers that be, white powers to be, will know that black people did more than breathe air in Huntersville, in Pottstown.
Speaking of, before we close out, Tyson, how can we support you with Torrance Lytle?
Man, we're gonna have we're gonna attend the next commissioner meeting. We've been at it 2 times. If you can look up that schedule, I don't have the exact date, but it's power in numbers.
Yep.
Send emails, and if you I would have to say that. It never else been have to say doing research on Lytle, but you guys are abreast of Torrance Lytle. But email the commissioners, the city leaders, people on the city council. When we attended the last meeting, we were made aware that they're ready to, they want to settle.
I did a piece today.
We got a very relevant announcement from Commissioner Arthur Griffin. The Second Ward High School National Alumni Foundation is planning a centennial celebration, 1923, 1969 to 2023. The school opened its doors in 1923 as the first City of Charlotte high school for black students. This is 2023, 100 years later, and students and communities continue the legacy of the dreams of Second Ward. Stay tuned for information about celebratory events. All are welcome to join. Again, guys, thank you so much for this Tuesday morning forum. I got to close it out officially, but after, again, they say we got to be out here at 10:30, but security hasn't come in yet. But